There's an Adam. Oh, it's a 101.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Pack to the Future. I'm your host, Ricky, a.k.a. Mr. eBay. And I am joined by my co-host and partner in crime, Dr. Chad.
Someone called for a doctor?
And we're joined, as always, he can't bet on sports, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Tim.
Here we go, baby. Prepare to be underwhelmed.
Well, today we have a very special show for all of you. Chad, why don't you tell us a little bit about our guest today?
On this segment, we are absolutely thrilled to bring you a very special guest. He is a Curt Gowdy Hall of Fame induction recipient. He is the podcast host of Legends of Sport and key photographer of Kobe Bryant's Mamba Mentality book. This person is the photographer of likely many of the sports posters you had on your wall growing up as a child.
Yep.
Including several different sports cards and the iconic 2021 Prizm Basketball LeBron James Kobe Bryant tribute dunk. So the Pack to the Future podcast is just ecstatic to welcome onto the show Andrew Bernstein. Andy, welcome onto the show.
Hey, fellas. Good to be seen by you. Good to be chatting with you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. And to be honest, the LeBron James card that I just mentioned was kind of the instigator into reaching out to you. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But the guys and I were chatting. Didn't really know your background when you said, yeah, you know, you'd come on the show, and we didn't know what your sports card background was. And then we were doing some prep for the show and listening to your Legends of Sport podcast one of the times that you interviewed Kobe. And we kind of had an aha moment. And Ricky, I think you have an audio clip of that moment. And Andy, tell us if perhaps this played a role at all. So Ricky, go ahead and play that.
Like in any job, there's a sacrifice, obviously, long hours or whatever it is that you do. Is it a fair trade-off, do you think?
Well, I mean,
at the end of the day?
As a kid, the sacrifice is not really a sacrifice to me.
Yeah.
You know, when people say, okay, well, you lose a normal childhood. Well, who defines what's a normal childhood? I don't know. What's normal?
Yeah.
Hanging out with your friends and doing what?
Yeah.
Going to the movies, walking around aimlessly, talking about things that mean nothing. Like
for me, it was like trading cards. You know,
I mean,
baseball cards,
okay,
whatever.
so you're missing out on that.
Yeah.
That's not much to miss out on.
I hurt for you, Andy.
I disagree with my friend the Mamba emphatically. I spent a lot of my misspent childhood and teenage years trading cards when I should have been elsewhere. Let's just leave it at that. So there's a couple of stories from my childhood that I could share with you, one in particular, but I don't know if you want to go down that road or not.
Yes, I want to hear it.
We'd love to hear
a hobby story.
All right, so I got this story. I don't think I've ever told this story. Maybe I've told it once on my podcast, but so I was born in Brooklyn. Okay. My family were huge, ridiculous Brooklyn Dodger fans for generations, right? The year I was born, 1958, was the year the Dodgers moved. They left Brooklyn. It was like a 5 million person funeral, you know, for a year, because they grieved the fact that their beloved Dodgers had left. They hated the O'Malleys. And in fact, in the Jewish tradition, when somebody dies, right, it's customary for the men in the family to wear a black armband, right? You know, sometimes they wear it for a year. It depends on how religious or Orthodox they are. So there are literally pictures of me as an infant with my uncles and my dad and my grandfathers wearing black armbands, right? So, you know, picture that as your childhood memory. But fast forward to the fact that we were, you know, we hated the Yankees. You know, it was drilled into me as a child. They always beat the Dodgers, of course, until, of course, they won in 55. So fast forward to about 1966 or so. I was maybe 9 years old. Should have been going to my Hebrew school class after school, but ended up in the schoolyard flipping cards and trading cards with my buddies. And I came home super, super excited because I had just traded for this amazing card. It was a Mickey Mantle card, right? So I had traded half of my collection, which was probably hefty, maybe 100 cards possibly for this Mickey Mantle. I come rushing in the house and I said, Dad, I can't believe that. You're not going to believe this. I traded my whole half of my collection for this card. It's unbelievable. He goes, really? Let me see that. Like, who is that? And I give it to him and he looks at it and he goes like this.
Oh,
No.
And in the best Brooklynese that he could muster, he said, don't ever bring anything with that logo into his house again.
Oh, no.
Wow.
Learned my lesson on that one, boys.
Oh, wow.
Gosh.
I think if anybody would appreciate it, it's probably you guys.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Our listeners
wow.
will. Our listeners.
And then the second story, this one is probably even worse. Okay, so I had this great baseball card collection. All the greats from the 60s and early 70s. I stopped collecting when I was probably 12, 13, but I had kept, these big shoe boxes of cards. I go away to college. I come home. I think it was like winter break or something. And I want to find my cards. And I knew where I put them. And I said to my mom, I said, what happened to my cards? She goes, oh, I threw those out with a bunch of old clothes that you had.
Oh, no.
That is really what we have to thank for that era of cards becoming so valuable is so
Unbelievable.
many moms and then so many other kids would stick them in their
Yeah.
bicycle spokes.
Yeah, exactly. So some New York City sanitation guy probably has my card collection and is probably retired in Florida from it.
That is
Painful.
fantastic. Have you come back to the hobby at all? Do you collect at all now?
Very, very briefly when the NBA started Skybox and what was the other one that started at the time? Hoops
There's
or something?
Fleer and Hoops.
Well, Fleer was and Star, the Star company.
Uh-huh.
So my photos were used for those cards, when I was first starting out in the early 80s. And then the NBA had Skybox and whatever the other one was. And, they sent me a couple of boxes and stuff. I actually have a couple of uncut sheets of those cards, which is kind of cool. I don't know if they're worth anything, but I probably have maybe 1,000 cards total.
I see.
Some mostly baseball, actually. I don't know why I have baseball cards, but I think that's what they sent me.
Very cool. Chad, did you have a question you wanted to jump into?
Yeah, I do. So I'll jump right into mine. And sticking on the theme of cards, and the reason that this connection started was with that LeBron James Prizm. So 2021 Prizm Basketball, LeBron James, Kobe Bryant tribute dunk.
This one.
That one, yeah. And I had this set up.
Handy, boys. Yeah.
And I loved it. In pre-show, you pulled that one right up. It made me smile. And so my question for you, this is such an iconic photo for a number of reasons. You talk about it in length on many different spots, but including a Sports Illustrated article with Ben Pickman. So you listeners can go back and check that out.
Right.
But really what I want to know is, at what point did you know that photo was going to be so iconic? And even furthermore, did you ever know it was going to end up on a card?
Well, I'll answer the second question first, because many of my cooler photos, let's put it that way, have ended up on cards over the years. Going back to Showtime and then Jordan era and Shaq and Kobe and all that. So I'm used to seeing my photos on cards. I don't get to see very much of them, quite frankly. One of my partners, my Legends of Sport partner's son, is in the card business. So he, shows me every once in a while some stuff. But that's kind of part of my job, just like my photos are published in magazines or online or websites or Instagram or whatever. Cards are part of it. That particular photo, quite frankly, took on a life of its own basically that night, the night I took it. I captured a moment just like I do multiple times a game, you know. This one was super cool because, you know, just the way it laid out and the fact that he was like suspended in air, it literally looks like he's walking on air.
Yeah.
He's got the blue shoes on, that was kind of bizarre. And then, you know, of course it really like mushroomed, I think, out of control when somebody from the Lakers digital department kind of put it side by side to a very similar Kobe dunk. I know you guys probably want to talk about that, which happened on that same basket, you know, a number of years before that. We had just lost Kobe a couple of weeks before I shot that. So LeBron was asked about it, I think, at the next game. I think they had a back-to-back, I think. Then they were in another city the next day, or it was practice or something. And he actually called out that card and actually mentioned me by name, which I almost, you know, floored me. The guys never do that, you know. And you know, it seemed like from that point and from social media and everything I was seeing and hearing, and people were texting me, that it just really just mushroomed out of control, more than I possibly had ever imagined, honestly.
Yeah, it's just such an amazing and beautiful card. I absolutely love it. And the only other question then, Ricky, I'll let you jump in. The only critique people have had of this card, not of the photo, but of the card, is how small LeBron is in the card. If you were to be the creator of this card, would you alter the photo here?
Oh, absolutely. 100% not. No. No. We don't alter photos. I mean, I know that card companies enhance them and they do all kinds of digital things and do 3D and cutouts and whatever. I don't know all the lingo, but no, I would never want to see that photo altered. No, because to me that, you know, that that takes away from the integrity of how I shot it.
Yeah.
And in fact, we have a policy at the NBA that we do not retouch, Photoshop, alter in any way, shape, or form any photos that are shot on assignment. So
I love it. That makes me so happy. I mean, Tim and I have been in some arguments about it. Like, I love the answer, and not just because you're here. Like, I really think I love that.
So let me then say then Tim is in favor of altering the card.
Yeah, Tim is in favor of altering cards, and I'll tell you what else. He trims cards.
Tim,
No. Categorically deny all of it.
Yeah, Ricky, we got to be careful here. Andy may not know our sense of humor here. We don't want to give him the wrong impression. We like to tease that Tim does these things.
No, it's all good.
Yeah.
Hey, look, whatever makes people happy, and if they like their cards in a certain way, so be it. You know, each their own. So it's all good. But from my standpoint, as you know, primarily a photojournalist, really. You know, it's almost sacrilegious to alter an image. So,
yeah,
you know, a lot of photographers have gotten into a lot of trouble from doing that. So that's why the NBA adopted that policy many, many years ago.
It makes sense as to why you would not want that doctored whatsoever, because that really is the role, right? Is to be documenting what's taking place in the history of the NBA. So
absolutely.
So Andy, what led you to one day wake up and say, you know, I'm going to become a photographer who sits in the front row and takes photos of all these legendary Los Angeles teams. And I'm going to befriend superstar athletes and travel to the Olympics with the dream team and live every single man's fantasy. What led you, what got you here? I guess, you know, I've read about you a little bit, but I can't seem to find a whole lot on when you left Brooklyn, what kind of led you into this role? Because it really is, I think, every man's dream.
Well, yeah, I appreciate you saying that. And, you know, that's not how things really started. I mean, I didn't have that particular specific goal in mind.
Oh, it wasn't that focused.
When I got my first camera when I was 14, I fell in love with photography. I mean, I remember the sort of the epiphany of just realizing that I could see something through my eyes and translate it right through a camera onto film in those days. And then even further, if, you know, working in the darkroom, could transfer it, you know, onto a print on a piece of paper and really watch as the magic happened. I don't know if you guys have ever been in a darkroom, but you know, you literally watch magic happen before your eyes. I mean, it's a blank piece of paper sitting in some solution, and within seconds, the image that you thought up through your head is appearing before you. It was just a magical thing. So I went to the University of Massachusetts because my dad wouldn't let me go to Syracuse, which is where I should have gone, because they had a tremendous communications and photography program.
Oh, Dad!
I hate to be slamming my poor dad, may he rest in peace, because he was so supportive of me. But anyway, I ended up at UMass. They had a communications department at UMass. Okay, so I didn't do a lot of research. I got to tell you guys, it was 3.5 hours from home. It was going to school with a different sort of set of kids than I grew up with. I didn't want to go to a New York State school and be with kind of the same kids, from New York. I wanted a different experience, but be close enough, that I could come home if I needed to. Anyway, I ended up going to UMass and should have probably read the course catalog, which they sent me in the mail. But I went to register for classes, and under P, there was nothing for photography. But there were communications. They were like public relations or, whatever. But what really saved me was the fact that we had a daily college newspaper.
Okay.
Came out 5 days a week, very prestigious newspaper, won a lot of awards. Our newspaper, because we were in Western Massachusetts, was really the newspaper that the townspeople got in the morning outside their door.
That's cool.
Because the next biggest paper was the Boston Globe, was 90 minutes away. It had to be trucked in. So, we had a standard, and we took it very seriously. And the photo editor there took me under his wing. All of a sudden, I think the third week of school, he made me the assistant photo editor, probably because nobody wanted it. And I was off doing assignments of all kinds, which really taught me a lot. I mean, I learned a lot on the fly, but I learned stuff from him, from the other photographers. I learned how to work on deadline. I learned how to shoot specifically for the design, the layout of the newspaper, because, it's very specific. You need a horizontal picture, you need a square picture, you need a vertical picture. You go to a football game, that you're shooting, we call it a hole, you're shooting for a horizontal hole. Basketball, same thing, although basketball is a vertical sport.
Yeah.
So, and I got exposed to all different sports there. And so I fell in love with sports photography. I knew that that's where I wanted to end up in a career. However, wasn't getting the technical training. I wasn't getting the history, the scientific training. Plus, I wasn't getting any business training whatsoever. So I made a hard decision in my junior year. I was only 19 at the time in my junior year. And I made a hard decision to transfer out to California, to Art Center College of Design, which is a super, like the medical school, they call it, of art schools. It's like this super high octane commercial art school. And the first week I was told that I was in the wrong place. I mean, like, what are you doing here? I remember literally saying, you're in the wrong place. I mean, we teach advertising photography, commercial photography, product photography, fashion, cars, aerial, architecture. We don't teach photojournalism here. We don't teach sports photography, which is like the poor stepchild of photojournalism. And I'm a Brooklyn guy. I really wasn't going to give in to that kind of talk. And I was starting to get discouraged, but I did have two teachers who really didn't let me give up, honestly. Yeah. And these two teachers are still in my life as mentors, very good friends. I lean on them all the time. In fact, I'm teaching for one of my previous teachers. I'm teaching for him at another college now, under his wing. So that's really how it happened. And then, look, I was very lucky. One of my teachers introduced me to some Sports Illustrated photographers who brought me out field, and I saw really, on the job what goes on. One of the things that I learned was how to light indoor arenas like the Forum or the old Salt Palace, the old Denver McNichols Arena, or the old Coliseum in Phoenix, the Pauley Pavilion, how to light those places for basketball and hockey with these big strobe lights, these big flash units that you probably notice on TV, or if you're at a game, you see them going off, but you don't really not cognizant of what that is or where they're coming from.
The unit you're kind of holding with the big telephone cord or something.
Well, not really. No, these are up in the catwalk.
Oh,
these are up
okay.
in the ceiling.
Much
and
higher. Okay.
And they're fired by a radio remote control that's attached to my camera.
Okay.
So literally, when I press the trigger on the camera, instead of the light that's there called the available light or the ambient light, exposing onto the film or now digital onto the chip, it's actually like having 100 flashes on top of your camera and taking a flash picture at that moment.
Wow.
So that was a very specialized technique. I was introduced to some people at the forum with the Lakers and the Kings at the time, and they had a door was open a little crack. I had a little Brooklyn moxie and opened the door a little bit more, introduced myself, worked out a deal where I could send photos to them in exchange for credentials and letting me put strobes up in the ceiling. And that led to an introduction to the NBA for the '83 All-Star game. And then it all took off from there. So
and then eventually it led to keys to the Staples Center.
Yeah, pretty much. When the teams moved, when the Lakers and Kings and Clippers moved to Staples Center, at one point we had 5 professional teams playing in Staples Center because we had a arena football team. Oh, yeah. Now we have 4. So we have Lakers, Clippers, Kings, and the Sparks, the WNBA team. We're the only arena that hosts 2 NBA teams, the only arena that has 4 professional teams playing. Wow. And when the teams moved in '99, I took on another hat as director of photography for AEG, which is the company that manages Staples. Microsoft Theater was built a few years later. We also do the photography for that. So in a non-pandemic world, me and the guys are really busy. We have, very active photography life. Yeah, no,
it kind of made my head spin thinking about covering all those sports on a regular basis. Yeah. Well, before we jump into a few questions from our listeners, Brooklyn Nets or Los Angeles Lakers?
Well, it's crazy to know that there's a professional team back in Brooklyn after all these, after 50 years or whatever it's been?
Right.
More, almost 60 years. It's crazy, but I don't have really an affiliation with the Nets.
Sure.
Right now, my Clippers are in the playoffs.
Okay.
I've been working. I am the last remaining original person who worked for the Clippers when they moved in '84.
Oh, how cool!
After the great Ralph Lawler retired, the voice of the Clippers, who goes back to San Diego days, I am the last standing person. And I've joked with Steve Ballmer. We talked about it on my podcast that, I can't retire until I see a banner up in Staples Center or the new arena he's going to build. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And I know that's his mission. So, and I want to see that fulfilled.
And I think that while as much as we all hate as Jazz fans, the Lakers, I think we cheer for the Clippers as an organization to win one because they're kind of in a similar situation as the Jazz.
Just not this year.
Not this year.
Yeah, well, I'm trying. Yeah, exactly. Just not this year. I'm trying to think back. We were talking about the game before we went on air. Trying to think if we said anything mean about the Clippers. I hope
no. It's going to be a spirited series. It's going to be a great series. It's going to go back and forth. I see this series going on at least 6.
Yeah.
I don't know when this is going to air, so we don't want to jinx it. But both teams. I mean, the Jazz. They didn't get the best record in the league for nothing, and I don't think they get the credit they deserve. Quite frankly, I mean, it's a small market team. Right. You have a couple of superstars on there, and they're not really the people. Across the country aren't exposed to the Jazz as much as. No. Even the Clippers, so.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, do you have a couple minutes for some listener questions?
Yeah, I would love that.
Great. Here is our first question from Adam at the Real 27 guy.
Hey, Andrew, thanks for taking the time to do this. I got a number of questions for you, but I'll start with just a couple quick ones. The first is, I know you've taken, a lot of different pictures of images that are really well known, but which are you most proud of? And then not only that, but which one do you think is the one that you think is most underrated? Thanks again for doing this, Andrew.
Ooh. Man,
Tough question.
It's going to make me have to think. Well, guys, I have to go back to this LeBron, photo, because that photo just didn't happen. There's tremendous amount of preparation that goes into being in the position to have that photo be taken. It looks like it just happened. If you watch the video, it happens in the blink of an eye, right? Where he, was going up all alone, went down, had the ball by his hip. Boom, that's when I decided to shoot it. I'm literally on the other end of the court, only seeing him from the back. But there are hours and hours of setup of this camera plus 5, 6, 7 other cameras, depending on the game and the arena we're in. It takes 3, 4, sometimes 5 hours to set up this remote camera system. The great Walter Yost, who's, the godfather of sports photography, with Neil Leifer, John Zimmerman, Walter's, a great friend. And he says very frankly that, and you've heard this before, but that luck benefits the most prepared. In our profession, it's the same thing. It's all about preparation. Walter didn't just show up at the 71 Super Bowl and get the most iconic picture of Joe Namath ever, or Neil Leifer just didn't show up in Lewiston, Maine and shoot the most iconic sports photo of all time, Ali over Liston. That took preparation and knowing your equipment and getting there early and everything that's involved, right?
Yeah.
And having a good crew. I have a couple of people who work with me every single game, and that's their job, is to get everything ready and buttoned up. So, when he asked about which photo I'm most proud of, I can point to that photo, and there have been many others, of course. The ones of, Kobe dunking or Michael Jordan, taking off from the free throw line at the 88 slam dunk championship, that just didn't happen. I had some intuition to think, well, maybe I should be on the sideline instead of under the basket at that point. Walter, of course, got the most iconic photo of him under the basket with the big scoreboard.
Right.
I happen to like my photo too, not more, but of him taking off, and you see everybody, in the background.
That's my favorite.
And then the most, he asked about the most underrated photo.
Right. Yeah.
Oh man, that's a great question. As we're talking, I'm looking at a bunch of pictures.
That's so hard. All my photos are amazing.
No, it's not.
He's right.
It's just,
it's true.
They are.
Yeah. Well, there's a photo I took of Kobe, which happens to be probably my top 3 favorite photos I ever took, and maybe my top 2 of Kobe, where he's just kind of, you've seen it. It's a black and white photo. He's got his legs in the Gatorade coolers, and he's got his finger in the coffee cup, and he's all beat up. That's a very photojournalistic photo. In fact, my 2 most well-known photos, quite frankly, are non-action photos. I believe it's that photo, and also the one of Michael Jordan holding the trophy, his first championship in '91, with his dad next to him, and all the significance of that, which is kind of funny because I never saw myself honestly as a photojournalist, in the sense of being like a newspaper or a wire service photographer.
Right.
So I hope that answered the question.
Yeah. And you know what? I know that you've probably heard this 1,000 times, but you just describing those 2 photos immediately for all of us gives us a flashback to that photo and emotions attached to it, whether it's me as a Jazz fan, like resenting Jordan for always winning the titles. And that's what I love about these things. I'm sure you hear that all the time, but we want to do that as well.
No, it's great that you say that, Chad, because, photography has taken on a whole new significance now in the age of iPhones. Everybody's a photographer, and that's wonderful because I think it's elevated the craft to a whole nother level. My daughter is 13, at a year and a half knew how to operate an iPhone, take photos and scroll, so that was pretty amazing. But, I think that photography as a craft and a photograph being a moment in time, God bless my video brethren out there. But we are stopping time for that moment. And especially with what I do with basketball and hockey, where I can only shoot one picture every 4 seconds because of this big strobe system. These flashes go off, but it takes them 4 seconds to recycle their energy back up so that they're ready to shoot again, because they're so powerful. So if you press the trigger during that 4 second sort of recycle time, you'll blow the strobes and then your night is over, basically. So we have to, a lot of experience, but we photographers who do this on a nightly basis, have to train ourselves to wait, anticipate, and then wait just that extra millisecond, sometimes. And then count in our head 1, 2, 3, 4 till the next time we can shoot again. It's a very regimented, disciplined way to work, quite frankly. I've been to the Olympics and other places where we don't have strobes and you can just shoot motor drive, available light and not have to worry about any of that stuff. Right. To me, it's not as much fun because I like the challenge of the one moment in time captured. That's what I like the best.
Well, and you do such a good job of how the way your photos tell such a story with, from just a single photo. I think it's really incredible. And I did see your piece on the Kobe in the Gatorade bath, the ice bath and everything. And it's just amazing how much information you can glean from that one photo in time.
Well, thank you.
And to the other side of it, the Jordan taking off photo, the inspiration that creates, whether you loved him or hated him, I can promise these two guys next to me did the same thing, which is the second you saw that photo, you went out in your backyard and tried to do it.
Yeah. It's true. It's true.
Or in your living room, with your mini hoop, and it's amazing just how those photos mean so much to us as we grow up.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thank you. And, Kobe told me he had all my posters on his wall growing up, and for him to say that really meant something because, as I got to know him and then we started to do our book together, I really understood what that meant when he said that at 18 years old at the time and his first, media day as a rookie.
Yeah.
I thought it was a smart ass comment, quite frankly, at the moment. But then when we started to do our book together and I saw how he broke down photos and how he, not just mine, but everyone's photos that I would bring him to look at throughout his career. It was really humbling actually to know that I, played some part in him improving his game or learning something about himself or his opponent or whatever.
Yeah.
As a photographer, you never think that that's really the case.
Right.
You shoot a nice picture of, a guy hitting a home run. I mean, to me, it's a nice picture.
Right.
Guys but they're looking at something so much different. They're looking at, where their hips are located, how they rotated their shoulders, whatever.
Right.
So that was pretty cool to find out.
That is really cool. And it's pretty amazing that both Kobe and LeBron James have such an appreciation for your work. And I think it goes to show just their love for the game at such a nuclear level, for lack of a better term. Yeah. And that's pretty amazing that they can have such an appreciation for all you've done for the game, which is really quite a lot. Our next question comes from another podcast in the hobby, a good friend of ours, Kyle from Wax Museum Podcast.
Hey, Andrew, this is Kyle from the Wax Museum Podcast. I want to thank you in advance for taking my question today. You've experienced all of these amazing moments really from behind a lens, and you've captured all of them for us, and we're appreciative of being able to see those. I'm just wondering, though, if there is something that was just really incredible or something that stood out to you that for whatever reason you weren't able to capture in photography, and something you weren't able to really to convey to us, be it for confidentiality reasons or just limitations with technology or whatever. Maybe you can share that with us now. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great, Kyle, you said, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that was a great question, Kyle, because Robert Ory talks about how he made a lot of shots, but he also missed a lot of big shots, right? So there almost on a nightly basis, am I kicking myself that I didn't get that picture or I didn't get this picture, and it could be operator error, meaning me, or it could be, ref is in the way or an arm is blocking a guy's face or whatever it can be. I'm my worst critic. I don't give myself enough credit when things do go right, for example. I want to answer that question specifically about confidentiality and my role as a photographer, primarily for the league itself, but for the teams as, sort of a piggyback kind of thing where I'm working for the teams through being the league photographer. And, my job and the rest of us who work as team photographers or the few of us who are the league photographers, we're there to make the guys look good, right? We're there to promote the game, to document the game. And of course we're going to shoot the good, the bad, and the ugly that happens. But, the ugly is not really what we're there for. We're not paparazzi. We're not there for the gotcha moments. And this really came into sharp focus for me, so to speak, when the Pistons beat the Lakers. I believe it was 88. I'm trying to remember if it was 88 or 89. 89, I think it was. The Pistons beat the Lakers, and they beat them at the Forum. And back then, the Forum had a tiny little visitors locker room, and the Laker locker room was sort of adjacent to it. And the only way you could get from one to the other was this very narrow, crowded hallway after a game. But the other way you could get between the two locker rooms was because both teams shared the same shower, if you can believe it. They had a mutual shower. I don't think there was even a partition between the two teams. They just used the same shower. So I knew, I got all the jubilation in the Pistons locker room. I was there, as the league photographer. I needed to get some dejection photos from the Laker locker room. And that really would be guys, taking off, whatever, icing themselves, talking to the media, whatever it could be. Couldn't get through the hallway. It was impossible. It was packed. So I went through the showers. And as I'm going towards the Laker locker room, there is Magic and Michael Cooper, fully dressed, still in their uniform, in the shower. Coop is like sitting with the water running on him. Magic standing right next to him. And that was like a Pulitzer moment. Wow. I mean, it's like, what a moment for a photojournalist.
Sure.
Not for a second did I think about taking that picture, because that would have blown everything for me. I had built so much trust from those guys. And I told that to both of those guys on my podcast individually, and they didn't know. They had no idea that I was even there, that I saw that.
That is so cool.
To this day, I point to that. And yes, if someone else was in my position, they probably would have taken it if that was part of their job description. But I didn't do that. So, I'll stand by it forever.
I think that speaks a lot to your character and your quality. And as Ricky's going to say, that
worked out well.
Exactly. Yeah, right.
It led you the right way, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, most of my career is built on trust, really. So,
yeah. Our next question comes from a couple friends of ours, Zach and Cooper, a couple kids from Elevate Sports Cards.
Hi, Mr. Bernstein. I am Zach.
And I am Cooper, and we are from Elevate Sports Cards.
I am Zach, and I'm 11. My brother is 9, and we both love sports and sports cards.
We're huge Lakers fans, and we know lots of your photos. We especially love your photos of Kobe and the old ones of Magic.
My favorite one is Kobe one where he has the Frobe and number 8 gold jersey against the New Jersey Nets, one-handed dunk, and it went on the Mamba Forever edition.
My favorite one is the one with Magic and Larry.
We'd like to ask you 2 questions. 1. Do you know about how many of your photos have been turned into sports cards?
And 2, do you have any favorite NBA photos you've taken? And why is it your favorite?
Thank you.
Well, it was Zach and who's the other guy?
Zach and Cooper.
Zach and Cooper. Yeah, I should have remembered that. Well, great questions, Zach and Cooper. First, the answer to the first question is I have no idea how many of my photos honestly have been turned into sports cards. I would probably say a lot. I don't know if anybody knows. If anybody knows, it's probably the NBA because they track that stuff. But
Right.
it's really gratifying and humbling, and I feel so grateful for the fact that I can bring joy to people who collect cards through my photos. I mean, it means a lot to me. In terms of favorite photos, we've talked about a couple of them already. There's a couple of Kobe dunks that were just amazing when he was young. There was one I took, I believe it was his second season. They were playing in the Forum, and at the Forum they had a beautiful like Laker gold key. The key was painted like a beautiful yellow gold color, and I had an overhead camera shooting straight down. And he just did this amazing dunk where he's just extended out, and it's horizontal. It's a beautiful horizontal. It was shot on 2.25 film, which is bigger size film. And I was super proud of that one. In fact, I was so proud of that picture when I saw it, because I didn't, this is the film days. So you don't see it right away. You put it in a bag, and the bag goes in a night drop at a lab. You have to go to the color lab the next morning and look at it, so there's a lot of anticipation. And when I saw it, I knew that I had gotten something very cool. Then I printed it and made a huge print, like big, gigantic, and framed it and brought it up to his house because he was living with his parents at the time. And I brought it up to his house and gave it to them. And I know that Vanessa still has that. And she told me recently that it hangs in her game room.
So cool.
And that's amazing to me that picture has withstood the test of time, and it meant so much to the family. So it's wonderful.
That is so cool.
I had a follow. Oh, one of our listeners called in and did leave a question, but it wasn't the most clear. He must have gone to Tim's same school of communication.
Come on now.
But he asked how your photographs turn into trading cards, and I'll follow up on it. Is it a situation where Panini and Topps and Upper Deck hire you, or are they given access to your photos by purchasing rights to the specific league?
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Panini is the exclusive card licensee of the NBA at this point.
That's
so Panini has access to the Getty Images archive. Okay. So Getty Images is basically licensor of NBA photography. So all of us NBA photographers, when we shoot a game, our photos first are transmitted back to an editor in New Jersey at NBA Photos at basically the headquarters. That editor is going through, picking out selected photos, captioning them, sending those to Getty, and then Getty posts them on the Getty Images site. Anybody can go on to gettyimages.com.
Right.
And anybody listening or watching this can go on there, gettyimages.com. In the search bar, you could put Bernstein, Kobe Bryant, and then click the editorial. It's either editorial or creative. You want editorial, and you'll see thousands and thousands of my Kobe Bryant photos, or Michael Jordan, or whoever. So that's how Panini does it. I think the other card companies, I don't know what rights they have, but they have to purchase the rights through Getty, and that's basically how it's done. They're official licensees, such as Panini, but they're also licensees for shoes and for posters and magazines and all that stuff. So basically that's how it's done. Now, that being said, those entities, Topps, Panini, Upper Deck, depending on what league we're talking about,
Right.
they do hire photographers. I mean, I've worked for way back when I used to do some things for Upper Deck. I did some things for Topps,
Cool.
I think, in baseball and also hockey. I have some very good friends who've made great livings working for the card companies.
Yeah.
They'll go to spring training and they basically, make a year's worth of a living in 8 weeks of spring training, which is wonderful, and that way the card company knows they're getting a specific photographer. They're getting, specific style that photographer shoots in, the dependability of that, because they have to create these card sets, new every single year. So that's how that's done.
Oh, that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Is that why our cards are so expensive? Just the rights to the images?
Yeah, I think that's probably right, because the rights, I have no idea what the rights fees are. I mean, if you go on Getty Images and you look to buy a picture just straight out from Getty, it'll probably give you an idea. That's not the price that a licensee is getting, or a licensee basically pays a flat fee to the leagues, and then the leagues, I guess they must have some kind of incremental structure that if they sell X number of cards or whatever, or if it generates X amount of income, then it's adjusted that way. I'm out of that whole side of the business, quite frankly.
Yeah. Got it. Well, we really appreciate you spending all this time with us, Andy. We do have one more question if you're up for it.
Yeah.
It's from our listener, Boston Steve.
What's up, guys? Boston Steve here, calling in with a question from Andrew. And before I get to my question, just want to thank you guys for reaching out to me and including me. It's not often that a Boston man is so humbled to talk to someone from Lakers Nation, but this is a really cool opportunity. So it's really two questions. One is, I'm wondering, Andrew, if any athletes have ever reached out to you individually and maybe thanked you for a way you captured a moment or recognized your art, good or bad. Sometimes maybe they're embarrassed with how they were featured, or, like I said, I'm really appreciative of how you captured a moment for them and documented their career. Second question. Following the January 15th, 1997, I'll call it the Dennis Rodman incident, is there any protective gear that you guys might use while you're that close to the athletes in the action? Because there's a lot going on around you. And just wondering if you have to suit up at all. All right. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it. Be well.
Well, Boston Steve, two great questions, buddy. And thank you for that. I went to school with a lot of people from Boston. I became a Red Sox fan while I was at UMass, but didn't really have an affiliation or anything with the Celtics while I was there. I think there was kind of a down period in the mid 70s. But I have nothing but love for Boston, and I make a pilgrimage every year to Fenway. Every year since I left UMass, I go to Fenway. I just went a couple of weeks ago with my college buddies. So
that's very cool.
Cool.
A lot of love for Beantown. So what was the first question he asked? Was about
did you have a player?
Player express
reach out to you to say thanks.
I'm interested to really hear, is there ever a player that was unhappy with you? Like, did Jordan ever come up to you and say, you caught me getting dunked on? I don't appreciate it.
I have to tell you that there's never in my career as a player ever said anything negative, like, I wish you hadn't taken that picture, or, oh man, that you took that picture, or anything like that. Again, I have to go back to the fact that I'm not there to take pictures that make them look bad. I might take bad pictures. There's a difference, but I'm not there to make them look bad. Now, of course, in any great dunk picture or block shot or, anything, there's going to be a guy who gets dunked on or shot blocked or whatever.
Who gets posterized.
That's something I can't control, unfortunately. And there's been jokes about that. I remember being on, I think I might've been with the Celtics during the 2008 season, traveling with them, which is kind of appropriate for this conversation. And somebody found out, I think it was KG, that I had taken some photo where he got dunked on or he looked bad, and he called me out on it. Yeah. But it was kind of in a joking way, but knowing KG, it probably had a little bit of zing to it too. And then the other question, what was the other question? Now I forgot.
About protection after.
Oh, yeah. Oh, well, all I'm going to say about that is that we're like 4 feet away from these gigantic human beings who are the most agile humans on the planet, to be honest with you. I mean, Shaq, for how big he was, you never really saw Shaq hit the deck, right? You never saw him really out of control, even with guys hanging on him. He landed on me 3 times in my career. Which, yeah, one time I thought I was dead. That's a whole other conversation. But after the Rodman thing happened, and Shaq and I have been good friends, and we were joking. And I said to him, okay, let's do this. I said, why don't you land on me and kick me, like the other guy got kicked, but don't kick me too hard. Then I'll sue you, and then we'll split the money. He said, that's a good idea, but that sounded really stupid. So, we obviously didn't do that, but to me it sounded good. I don't know.
Do you ever attend sporting events? Oh, I guess you just said you just went to Fenway with your college friends.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I was a ball boy for the Jazz for a very short period of time. And I say that only because I can understand that being down there on the floor is almost like a completely different world than being up in the stands. Yeah. The sounds, the sights are different. Can you enjoy a game as a casual fan in the stands as much?
Well, it's funny. I've been to very few NBA games as a fan. When my older kids are in their 20s, when they were little, I would take each of them or both of them together to a game every couple of years. I love to go to hockey games as a fan. I just love watching games. Sometimes, it's guys' night out, and I go with some dad friends, and it goes back to my hockey roots growing up. Got a Dodger game coming up, I think next week, with some friends coming in from the East Coast. I love going to games. But I had an experience last week, quite frankly, that I wasn't working the Clippers. It was game 5 of the Clippers Dallas series. And I wasn't working that night. I had sort of tailed back a little bit here during the early part of the playoffs. And Jimmy Goldstein, the super fan, invited me to the game as his guest. And I've been friends with Jimmy forever. And he was at your game last night. He goes to a game every night during the playoffs in a different city, which is unbelievable. And he and I have been great friends for my whole career, for 40 years. And he's invited me before, but I'm always working the game. So I spent the whole day with him and went with him to the game, which was quite the adventure, and sort of lived in Jimmy's world. And his usual seats are on the baseline next to the visitors bench for Lakers and Clippers. It's where he prefers to sit.
Okay.
But because of the pandemic and the social distancing, they don't have baseline seats at Staples. So he sat right dead center court, and there I am sitting with Jimmy. People are looking over at me like, why aren't you working? Like, what's going on? The referees were coming up to me, but it was so fun. And I had never seen a game from that vantage point.
Yeah.
From that spot. Like I've shot in the corner. I've shot obviously underneath the basket, a little bit up, like foul line extended, maybe is the furthest I've ever gone.
Right.
One of my most famous photos was taken from that spot in Boston Garden in '85, my first Sports Illustrated cover, from that exact spot from up the sideline, but not center court. So that was super fun, man. I hope he invites me again.
That is freaking cool. Amazing. All right. Well, Andy, thank you again for joining us. We'd love to have you on again in the future if schedules would permit. And thank you.
I have a question though, Ricky.
Yes.
Ricky, do I have to take another iconic photo to get on your show?
No. We will have you on anytime you want.
There are times I get home from work and I've had a bad day, and I walk, this card sits in a card case on my wall. I'll go over and just seriously, I'll just stare at them. And I'm this takes me to a happy place. So,
I love it.
One in my lifetime's good.
Since you guys are in Utah, I would love to come back on and talk specifically jazz history and jazz stories. And,
yes.
My history goes back like I said, back to the Salt Palace days. So
yes, I would love
So cool.
coach.
We have to do that. And we'll definitely have you back on. Andy, where can people find your work? What's the best place to find you?
Well, my photography can be found on Instagram and Twitter at ADB Photo Inc. At ADB Photo Inc. I'm really pushing hard on my new platform. Well, it's not that new anymore, but it's called Legends of Sport. You can see it's all over the place. I host a weekly podcast, and it's distributed by the LA Times on their platform, but also on Apple, Spotify, and everywhere else. So I sit with just NBA or WNBA basketball-centric people in sports, but people all around sports in different sports, different walks of life in sports, owners, trainers, could be, former athlete, doesn't matter. Journalists, photographers, So that's been a blast for me. I just actually did my 130th podcast for Legends of Sport, and we're growing Legends of Sport. We're about to do live events, which we were prohibited, of course, from doing for a year. So we're going to start, and we might be in your neighborhood doing a jazz event. And of course, I'll let you guys know.
Please do. Please do.
But we have this sort of template of events that we can take from one city to the other in the NBA and WNBA, because I have so much history there. So that's basically, it's called at Legends of Sport on Instagram. Our YouTube channel is Legends of Sport, TikTok as well. And all the podcasts in this third season are now being released in video as well. So if you don't feel like just listening, you can actually watch, and we insert photos into the video itself.
Oh, I'm going on there the second we end this show. I can't wait to check that out. Cool. Thank you again, Andy Bernstein, and the great Andrew Bernstein. He has taken so many iconic photos, and we're really looking forward. We will definitely take you up on that offer to come back on and talk jazz.
Yeah, anytime, fellas. It's been a super blast for me, and you guys are so knowledgeable about everything that you specialize in, and I think that's fascinating. To me, I learned some stuff just by talking to you guys. I know that the card market is what it is, but I want to learn more about it. And I think, you can help me with that. So it's great.
Absolutely. All right. So check out our friend Andy Bernstein and Legends of Sport. You can find him on Instagram, on Twitter, on YouTube. You can find him anywhere you get your podcasts. It's super awesome, the stories that they tell and the experiences that he has had. Guys, it's been another fun show for Chad, Tim, and Andy. This is Ricky, the ripped up Mickey Mantle, wishing all of you a one-of-one night. We just gave you an hour with Andy Bernstein. What more do you want?